Claressa Shields gave her entire soul to Papoose, believing she was building a future. But the brutal, unvarnished truth just exploded right in her face. Papoose never truly left Remy Ma. While he was holding Claressa in public, his wife still held the actual keys to his home. He paraded a new relationship, yet refused to erase Remy Ma's name from his skin, and intentionally delayed filing for divorce until May 2025. The trap was engineered from day one, and when the devastating news dropped that Papoose had officially walked back through Remy's front door, the undefeated champion of the world completely collapsed. The strongest woman alive didn't just weep. Her spirit was utterly shattered by the cold, hard receipts of a betrayal she never saw coming. This is the exact moment the illusion died, and the agonizing truth took its place. To truly comprehend the depth of Claressa Shields' emotional devastation, we have to look past the dramatic social media headlines and examine the cold, hard, unyielding facts of the timeline. For nearly 2 years, the public was led to believe they were witnessing a classic story of moving on. We saw Papoose, a veteran of the hip-hop industry, stepping out into the spotlight with a world-class undefeated boxing champion. To the untrained eye, it looked like a fresh start. It looked like a man who had finally closed a massive 22-year chapter of his life with Remy Ma, and was actively building a brand new empire with a woman who operated at the absolute pinnacle of athletic excellence. But behind the carefully curated public appearances, a completely different reality was being engineered. The foundational bricks of this new relationship were not built on solid ground. They were built on a quicksand of legal delays, emotional lingering, and structural deception that was destined to collapse. The first major explosion in this narrative comes directly from the official legal timeline. When a man is truly finished with a 22-year marriage, the very first step toward building a new life is securing his legal freedom. It is the ultimate statement of intent. Yet, throughout 2024 and the early months of 2025, while Papoose was fully public with Claressa Shields, the court systems remained completely untouched. The paperwork that would legally sever his ties to Remy Ma did not exist. In fact, official records reveal that Papoose did not formally file for divorce until May 2025, months after he had already integrated Claressa Shields into his public life and allowed her to invest her heart, her reputation, and her emotions into their partnership. This multi-month delay wasn't just an administrative oversight. It was a psychological safety net. While Claressa Shields was operating under the assumption that she was the leading lady in a new chapter, Papoose was legally keeping his foot firmly wedged in the door of his past. He allowed Claressa Shields to bear the public weight of being his new partner, while ensuring that on paper, he remained bound to Remy Ma. But the legal documents are only half of the betrayal. The physical and symbolic boundaries of his past life were never dissolved. Throughout the entirety of his relationship with Claressa Shields, Papoose made distinct choices that signaled he was never truly vacant from his marriage. First, he flatly refused to remove or cover the massive ink dedication to Remy Ma permanently etched into his skin. Every single day that Claressa Shields looked at the man she loved, she was forced to look at the literal name of the woman who came before her. More damningly, the physical logistics of his life remained tethered to his matrimonial home. Papoose never fully packed his belongings, never entirely vacated the space he shared with his wife, and most crucially, Remy Ma retained the primary, unmitigated keys to his living space. This is the exact point where the situation transitions from a standard breakup into a masterclass in emotional manipulation. While Claressa Shields was being handed token gestures of affection, the heavily discussed bracelets and designer backpacks that populated their social media feeds, Remy Ma still held the literal key to his daily existence. Papoose engineered a toxic dynamic where he kept his wife at a distance but within arm's reach, while keeping his new partner close enough to validate his ego, but far enough to avoid legal and emotional finality. He gave Claressa Shields a public title with absolutely no structural paperwork to back it up, and he gave Remy Ma a legal marriage with a temporary lack of physical presence. He became the sole architect of a double life, leaving both women to navigate an unmapped territory of uncertainty, while he sat comfortably in the middle, completely insulated from the consequences of his own indecision. To truly grasp why this situation caused such a catastrophic emotional breakdown for Claressa Shields, we have to examine the profound psychological blueprint of Papoose's attachment to Remy Ma. This wasn't just a standard marriage. It was a 22-year codependency rooted in what experts call anxious, consuming attachment. Remy Ma herself laid out the entire psychological framework in her own raw commentary, explicitly stating that Papoose used to be gorilla-glued to her everywhere she went. This intense level of anchoring didn't stem from financial dependence or superficial convenience. It came from a deep-seated, terrified anxiety of losing her attention to another man, another artist, or another executive. For over 2 decades, Papoose's entire identity was structurally and emotionally wrapped around being Remy Ma's ultimate protector and partner. You do not simply delete 22 years of that specific psychological conditioning in a matter of months. That level of consuming devotion doesn't vanish, it merely goes underground, waiting for the right catalyst to violently bring it back to the surface. And that catalyst exploded in the most public way possible when Remy Ma was romantically linked to battle rapper Eazy the Block Captain. This is the exact moment where the illusion of Papoose moving on with Claressa Shields was completely shattered by his own actions. If Papoose had truly been emotionally checked out of his marriage, if he had truly been fully present and invested in building a new life with an elite champion like Claressa Shields, his reaction to his ex-wife's new flame would have been civil, detached, or handled strictly through legal channels. Instead, the world watched as Papoose completely lost his composure, allegedly engaging in a brutal, physical altercation that resulted in knocking Eazy the Block Captain unconscious. This violent explosion of jealousy sent a massive shockwave directly into Claressa Shields' world. It was a cold, undeniable wake-up call that proved her partner was still fundamentally possessed by the ghost of his past. A man who completely loses his mind and resorts to physical violence over his wife's proximity to another man is not a man who has moved on. He is a man who is still deeply, desperately, and dangerously in love with his wife. While Claressa Shields was giving her absolute best to validate their public relationship, Papoose was emotionally operating in a completely different arena, fighting a war for Remy Ma's attention. He was physically standing next to a new woman, but his heart, his anger, and his deepest emotional triggers were still entirely controlled by his old life. This realization is precisely what triggered the slow-burning, agonizing descent for Claressa Shields. Imagine being an undefeated world-class athlete, someone whose entire life is built on discipline, dominance, and absolute control, only to find yourself entirely powerless in your own relationship. As the realization settled in that she was merely a shield used to mask a man's unresolved marital trauma, the emotional cracks began to widen. The public performance of their happiness could no longer sustain the heavy weight of the backstage reality. Every single time Papoose looked at his past, every time he delayed the final legal severing of his marriage, he was actively draining the emotional security of the woman standing right next to him. Claressa Shields wasn't just dealing with a standard breakup. She was forced to swallow the bitter, humiliating truth that she had spent 2 years fighting for a position that was never actually empty, completely trapped in a toxic matrix engineered by a man who refused to let go of his history. The final catastrophic blow to Claressa Shields' emotional stability didn't just come from the legal documents or the public street fights. It came from the haunting, inescapable presence of a living legacy. In any complex separation involving children, the family dynamic becomes a battlefield of emotional triggers. For Papoose, his connection to Remy Ma was permanently, biologically anchored in the face of their daughter, Reminisce. Every single day, the public, the media, and Papoose himself were confronted with an undeniable truth. The child is the absolute spitting image of her mother. For a man who spent over 2 decades consumed by an intense, anxious attachment to his wife, that little girl represents a daily, walking mirror of the woman he built his entire life with. You cannot outperform, outtrain, or outcompete that level of history. Every father-daughter interaction, every milestone, and every family photograph wasn't just a moment of co-parenting. It was a subconscious bridge straight back to Remy Ma. This biological reality created an environment of intense, suffocating pressure that eventually pushed the dynamic past its breaking point. When a toxic mix of jealousy, insecurity, and public scrutiny begins to boil over, people inevitably cross lines they can never step back over. An online narrative began to surface, with malicious comments suggesting that Papoose had desperately wanted a boy, subtly hinting that his daughter was somehow a source of disappointment. The moment the innocent child was dragged into this adult war as strategic ammunition, the entire structural integrity of the relationship collapsed. Using a man's child as a weapon in a desperate bid to win a public argument isn't just a tactical error. It is an absolute admission of total emotional defeat. It exposed a raw, ugly underbelly of deep-seated resentment that proved the new relationship was completely rotting from the inside out. This toxic escalation is exactly what triggered Claressa Shields' ultimate, heartbreaking breakdown. For months, the undefeated champion had attempted to fight this emotional battle the only way she knew how, through sheer dominance, public performance, and vocal defiance. Every single time a rumor surfaced, every time a family portrait of Papoose and Remy Ma gained traction online, there was an immediate hyper-defiant response. But real peace doesn't require a press release, and true emotional security never needs a late-night audience. The frantic speed of the clapbacks and the desperate timing of the late-night social media posts at 2 a.m. were not signs of strength. They were the heartbreaking leaks of a woman completely drowning in discomfort. The champion was exhausting herself trying to convince the world she was unbothered, while privately suffocating under the realization that her partner's past was actively destroying her present. The final realization hit like a devastating right hook to the soul. Papoose had officially walked back through Remy Ma's front door, abandoning the temporary illusion he had built. For Claressa Shields, the breakdown was absolute because the humiliation was absolute. She had stood before the entire world as an elite, unbreakable force, only to realize she had been completely manipulated by a man who used her celebrity to patch over his own broken marriage. She woke up to the agonizing truth that while she was being handed superficial tokens of affection, the real prize, the man's undivided heart and legal commitment, was never on the table. The strongest woman alive didn't just lose a relationship. She was entirely shattered by the cold, unyielding reality that she had spent 2 years fighting for a ghost, leaving her completely broken in the ruins of a position that was never truly vacant. This is the brutal reality of the entertainment industry, where the lights are bright, but the manipulation runs incredibly deep. Claressa Shields fought with the heart of a champion, but she was playing a game where the rules were rigged from the very beginning. Now, the absolute biggest question lands directly on you. Was Papoose ever truly available? Or did he intentionally lure an undefeated champion into a trap just to make Remy Ma jealous? Did Claressa cross the line by letting the online drama escalate? Or was she simply a woman pushed to her absolute breaking point by a man who refused to let go of his past? I want to hear your raw, unfiltered thoughts right now. Drop your perspective in the comments section below. Let's get the real conversation started. If you are completely tired of the mainstream media sugarcoating the truth and hiding the real timelines, hit that like button right now, subscribe to Celebrity Insider, and turn on your notifications. You cannot afford to miss what is coming next. In our very next episode, we are dropping the ultimate bombshell. We are breaking down Remy Ma's side of the story, exposing the hidden receipts, and revealing the exact moves she made behind the scenes to reclaim her home. The timeline is about to get a whole lot hotter, and trust me, the evidence will leave you completely speechless. Stay locked in, stay sharp, and we will see you in the next breakdown.